So today is the 30th of July 2013. We're in Manuka in Canberra at 33 Derville Crescent interviewing Enrico Taglietti. And interviewing you is Sylvia Micheli and myself, Janina Gosseye.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question that we usually ask is...
You said Durville.
It's wrong?
Why not Durville?
Oh, yeah, I'm trying to say it in an English way.
That's right.
But then it's Derville Crescent. Sounds a
Le
bit...
Comte Durville. Yes, please.
So, what architecture qualifications did you gain and from which institutions?
I had my degree in Milano from the Politecnico di Milano, 1953.
1953. So which year did you start?
40, at the end of 47, say 48. Yeah.
And what made you decide to study architecture in the first place?
I don't know. Absolutely, I do not know. During the war, I was in Africa, in Eritrea and Ethiopia, and when the British came in, we were blocked, practically prisoner of time in Asmara. And I finished my baccalaureate, and the only thing that kept me working with my mind was that I had a facsimile University of Medicine in Asmara, and so I started medicine and done it for 8 months, and then I said no, not for me. So arriving in Milano, I started a bit of naval engineering in Genova, and then finally I said, Milano is alright, what about going to the Polytechnic and do architecture? And that's how I done architecture. It was not a revelation, it was a long process.
And do you remember your architecture teachers at the Polytechnic?
Yes, obviously I remember my architectural teacher was Ponti, Zanuso, Albini, later Rogers, Belgioioso, Peressuti and Rogers, De Carli. Those are the very one, and was my teacher of structural science was partly Pierluigi Nervi. So he was coming from Pierluigi Nervi is born around Milano, but he was teaching in Rome. But Milan Polytechnic had the most advanced equipment to test model, and he was coming up practically every month to check his own model. And so every time he came up there, he was giving a lecture, and he was a bit like Le Corbusier. He expected that anyone who was designing properly according to the modern theory should arrive at the same conclusion. So it doesn't matter if you had 10, 20 students designing something, he said at the end, if you'd done the proper job, you would be arriving at the same conclusion. And I was, after a while, I told him, said, you must be joking. And I almost been kicked out, but that's all right. So that was Pierluigi Nervi. And again, if you're looking at the work of Pierluigi Nervi, it's nothing that could be expected, right? And he was not calculating the structure. He was using the model to tell him what he was doing was correct in relation of stresses.
Yes.
So that was...
and what did you think of Ponti, and what was he teaching? What was his...
Ponti is... Ponti was, to me, a very good teacher. Not a very good architect, but a very good teacher, because he had always something... he was a child, put it that way, in soul, and he had always that fantastic approach to what was happening, and so it was. I enjoyed Ponti, not, as I said, not as an architect, but as a teacher. De Carli, good teacher too. Zanuzzo was a bit too full of himself, just like that. Albini, good teacher. And Cavalle, the one of designing, teaching about not structural science but reinforced concrete, was very, very good in a way. He was an engineer, obviously, and he was telling us, when you're thinking about structure, you're using a coefficient of safety. And he said, never call that one a coefficient of safety. It's a coefficient of ignorance. You don't know what will happen. Therefore, the less you know, the more you have to multiply your...
Yes.
That one.
And you said that it was very Bauhaus, the education that you got?
It was very Bauhaus, yes. And the fact of, form follow function, and it's exactly what Pierluigi Nervi was saying, isn't it? If you follow the function, then the
form would...
the shape will take. And I said, no. I mean, if you follow the shape, the function will be adaptable, right? And it's in history it's been always like that. Great building, they quite often change in function, but because of that they are not become past. The function will have to adapt into a good space.
So in this sense, are you thinking about Mies van der Rohe?
Yes, obviously Mies van der Rohe. Among the Bauhaus people, Mies van der Rohe, who said that, he was in actual fact the most free of them all, Gropius, etc. While Mies van der Rohe, if you're looking at his building with their rigid form of steel, but they're creating inside volume that they are not rigid. And that's what is the great part of, it's... And from Mies van der Rohe, that I met briefly in Chicago, I learned that building that everyone calls being architecture is a misnomer. Everyone says, oh, the architecture of Canberra, or the architecture... to me, that Miss van der Rohe philosophy, not philosophy, but what I've seen about him, is that you have a dichotomy between the inside of a building and the outside of the building. And it's a total dichotomy. The inside of the building is always a private space. And that, when you're creating void in that private space, that is architecture, right? The external part of the building does not belong to that type of architecture, belong to the urban design. Right? If it's a good building, it's referring to urban design. Therefore, it's mostly because it's totally public. You know, everyone using the external part of the building, and that external part of the building will create cities, not the architecture. Right? The architecture will create void to enjoy for private spaces, and that is one theory that I always using, that even university that today have architecture has been, university faculty of architecture, and they do everything, and they should never be doing that one. But it should be divided into one for architecture, one for urban design. And urban design is a lot more difficult than architecture, right? Even for a good architect, because you have that relationship that between other building, and that's also, if you're looking at Italy, great squares and so on, they seem to be good urban design, even if the architect is not very good. Look at Venice, look at Siena. It's always, if you're thinking of architecture as is taught today, architecture is not very good, but urban design is good. And so the internal part of the building that is architecture has no relationship.
So what did you think of your own education of your what did you think of your own architectural education? Do you think it was well-rounded and there was...
My education? Look, I was... yes, my education, I don't think my education as an architect did not come from the school, from the Polytechnic. It came from... what you call it in Italian, a pallino. How would you translate pallino? I don't know, but a feeling, something that I always had, that the major control of your life is philosophy. Actual, from the origin of Greek philosophy until modern time, philosophy is the sort of a needle of what is directing your effort, including architecture, and that's what this one is not sounding the right thing, but so that's it. It's philosophy, and so if you're looking at any philosophy, you should create good architecture if you are blessed with something that cannot be taught. And that is the second thing that I think about, the faculty of architecture that should never exist. You cannot teach architecture. Right? You can teach building, good structure, etc., but not architecture. And remember, every polytechnic was originally a school of engineering and not architecture, including Milano.
But before you were explaining that via the Polytechnico you could go to Marseille and you did meet Le Corbusier and they did organize different things for the students. Is that just one, or could you tell us some more about that?
About
going to Marseille, and were there other of those type of excursions where you could meet architects and interact with?
Yes, look, I was fortunate because being at the Triennale in Milano during the 10th Triennale, I officially met a lot of architects, from Richard Neutra to Oscar Niemeyer, that he was coming visiting. Le Corbusier also came down there, and so other sculptor and an artist like Tapio Virkala, and Lucio Fontana was a friend of mine, older than me, but Lucio was really coming to our place every time we want to have a drink with Tapio Virkala. But so that ambience was, what I was pleased, because one was talking about largely art or architecture and so on, and philosophy, and that was my background. So fortunate.
So was that more of an education in architecture than the actual course that you took?
Oh yes. I mean, really, at the end, even myself, and let's say at the Polytechnic, after the second year, third year, I decided that I couldn't care less about what was the teaching. I said I enjoyed having that, but said I wanted to finish. That's all. Have my degree and go on. So I think that is quite reasonable to accept even today, although I don't, that when I'm teaching at Canberra University, the student seems to use that method. I mean, really, to adapt themselves. I mean, they want answer from me, and I cannot give them answer. I can give them only opinion. And I said, please, it's an opinion. It's not an answer, and I will not mark you. So that, please listen to me. But that is that was the issue, to finish and have a degree so I could do things.
And the group you studied with, how many students were there in your year?
No, right. The student at my year, we enter the Faculty of Architecture, there were 120 students, and at the end of the 50 years of fifth plus few months for me, we were having the degree in 5.
5 students?
5. I mean, there were a lot more having the degree at that year, but of the
one
original
that started.
120, we were in 5. Now, when you consider now the Polytechnic of Milano, where I go sometime to give some lecture, when they ask me, there are 5,500 students of architecture, 5,500. I mean, how can you cope? When you consider that if you have Europe number of architects, say there are 100 architects in Europe, just to say number, 1 million, say 1 million, right? 1 million architects in Europe, you know how many are Italian? Do you? 500,000, right? is proportion
Mm.
half and half. Half are Italian, half
Half
are
for the
from
rest of Europe,
the
yeah.
rest of. It's almost ludicrous.
Mm.
That's all.
So, how did the study you did at Politecnico, that was full time, or did you also have to work in offices during those student years?
No, the the policy of Polytechnic was full time.
Mm.
But at the end of the full time, you had a degree, but not a practice.
You still had to do an internship. Or
2 years
Yeah.
within some
And where did you do your internship?
with the Carly.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember the projects that you worked on and how big the office was
Yes,
at the
yes,
time?
yes. I even have I don't know where I have, but we designed few things, but the major one was the Teatro Sant'Erasmo.
Mhm.
That was a theater on the round in Milano. That was Cropius, and was a fascinating one. In actual fact, it's in the publication of that work, I am a collaborator.
Ah,
So
yes.
I was mentioned by
Mentioned.
Thomas and so on. And really, into that respect, my first year, say 1953 was my degree.
Mhm.
1954, end of 53, between the end of 53 and the end of 54, beginning of 55, when I came here, I had four publications in Domus.
Really? And what were the other ones?
Sorry?
What were the other public? If there were.
No, publication of things in Domus. Was my house, was my
Mhm.
furniture, and
Yes.
and then in 55 was the exhibition in Sydney.
So, and do you still have those? Those are in. Oh, so those are in Domus. We
I
can
have-
check them. Yeah,
Yes,
we
I
can check
have them, but that's
them.
a different story. I did not have them. I had only pages of them.
Well, we can find them.
But
So, and who were? You said you weren't very impressed by Ponti, but who were the architects that you did admire when you were studying?
no, all right. As an architect, I mean, there were it's the one. First of all, the one that I followed, not being a good architect, but it was just forgot about the one in Rome, Bruno Zevi.
Yeah, Zevi.
Because Bruno Zevi was in actual fact the one that had a philosophical theory that I totally embraced. And of course, to a certain extent, the influence of Zevi was to introduce organic architecture. And therefore, most probably you have to put Frank Lloyd Wright in it, but not excessively,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
But Frank Lloyd Wright, obviously, the organic approach.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you also had a certain admiration for Di Carlo
Di?
for Di Carlo as you went to work in his office. So you appreciated his architecture as well.
Yes, Carlo De Carli. Yes, appreciated, and he moved away from the rigidity, but De Carli was already a bit on the organic approach to architecture. and so it went quite well. You know, it's a sort of a friendship at the end.
So, how did you end up in Australia? Because you moved at the beginning of '55. You came to Australia. How did that occur? And
Yes, look, at the end of '54, we went around the world for 3 months with my wife, looking at that dichotomy between architecture and town and urban design. And we went to a lot of places. Moscow, under the communists, but that's all right. I mean, I didn't use, I used my passport through Switzerland because that, if not, I could not go there because it was a barrier for it. And I found myself in Moscow, and one of the magnificent places that everyone should look should be the Kremlin. The Kremlin is incredible. I never expected to find something as good, architecture and urban design. Then we went to Athens, obviously, and we went to Madrid and Constantinople, where the best architectural building I ever seen was Hagia Sophia. And then we went to New York, and there is total urban design, very little architecture, except obviously the Guggenheim Museum. Went to Chicago, and then we back to Italy to the Triennale, and then they asked us to go to.
What was your involvement in the Triennale precisely, or how did you?
I was the ordinator of the exhibition, mostly with the foreign entry. I think I have the Decima Triennale book there.
And how did you get that commission to do that, to organize?
I don't know. It's fortune again, but the two people that they were among the director of the Triennale at the time. One was De Carli,
yes.
and the other one was Lucio Fontana. Another one was Zanuzzo. I never gone well with Zanuzzo, but De Carli obviously was, and Lucio Fontana. So that's the connection. So I said, what about coming here? And I said, that was my beginning.
And what can you tell us some more about the Triennale? Can you tell us some more about the Triennale itself?
The Triennale in itself is.
Or the one you organized at least, and how you.
Yes, it was. I mean, I did not. I was. It's a thing out there. Just not the funny thing, but on the tripod. It's a certification of collaboration. That is the Triennale one. But okay, so the point was that we.
Diploma di collaborazione.
But it's something.
We'll be careful with it.
All right. It was the continuous connection because every nation that they had exhibits, Spain, Finland, Belgium, Pays-Bas, and Germany, Switzerland, and so on. They sent someone with to said, all right, and I said, all right, look, what is the size of your exhibit, and so on, and so organizing a space within the building. But also, you enjoy the fact that you have that contact that you could never have in a normal practice.
And do you remember do any of the contributions stand out, or do you remember any of them?
Yeah, look, yes, I remember. I remember that is complete. Partly is Fontana, magnificent lighting of the exhibition. Albini with the covering, and Capogrossi with the complete ceiling made of round glass formwork what coming, and that was with the design of Capogrossi. So those things, and then Le Corbusier talking there, and Oscar Niemeyer having a good. We had a dinner one evening for him, and talking about Brasilia, and so that was was impossible to describe in full, but there were few months of non-stop doing things and enjoying things and saying, oh, this one is not good. I never told them because I was not there to judge anything.
And it was from there on that you got the connection to Australia, or it was because of your role in the Triennale that you got the job?
Yes. Churchill Lloyd Jones was a friend of the president of the Triennale. The president of the Triennale was Ivan Matteo Lombardo, was a politician, and he asked him he would have liked to have an Italian exhibition in Sydney, and at that time, which was 1955, Italy was coming out from the destruction of the war, and it was really Milano was practically the center of design in Europe, and he said, "Can you approach Joe Ponti if he would do something for the exhibition?" And even Matteo Lombardo said, no, don't use an old fellow, use a young one. And he mentioned my name, so that's it. From there on, they sent someone from Sydney, a young lady called Marisa Martelli, to be in contact with me. And then Mr. Bishop came from London to organize things, and finally I prepared the basic of the exhibition for art and architecture, and they had all the other industrial design, industrial issue. They had the Vespa, and they had the little car there of the Innocenti. We had the first coffee machine, big boat coming out there, and fashion parade. I didn't organize the fashion parade, but that was part of Italy and David John. And so I arrived in Australia, taking 3 days and 3 nights by plane, stopping every half a day to either have lunch or dinner or going to sleep and went to Athens, Beirut, Karachi, Colombo, Singapore, Darwin, Sydney. And in Sydney, we've been received by the two sons of Sir Charles Lloyd Jones, David and Charles, young fellow, and then we were accommodated at the Hotel Australia that is not existing any longer, but in all the traditional hotel of Australia, where we placed our shoes outside the door to be clean, and in middle of the night the door opened and the shoes flew in and they said, "You clean it yourself."
Australian way.
That was the top hotel in Sydney. We stayed there for a few days because and then we found a place in Cremorne, which is on the other side of and we on the harbour, and I was going to Sydney by little ferry. Morning and start working. Wife arrived later and been taken around by someone from David Jones personally. Good. So that's it. Finished the exhibition.
Can I briefly interrupt? Do you know how was it explained? What was the purpose of the exhibition for David Jones? Why did they want to do this?
Look, David Jones was organising exhibition to introduce Europe. I call it Europe because not necessarily Asia, but Europe architecture and design and industry into Australia. Australia was backwater, really. And they started, I think, with the fin or exhibition of the north part of Europe, and then Italy came in because also they were in actual fact the two design center of Europe, and that was the idea, and also in relation to obviously selling things.
Yes.
So
the commercial aspect.
Yeah, the commercial, and they had, and they still have three what do you call it? Three places in Sydney. One in Market Street, one in George Street, and one in Elizabeth Street. And the three of them, they had the George Street had the exhibition of my house and the furniture, and Elizabeth Street had the art gallery on top where I designed part of it too, and Market Street was dedicated to the industrial artifact, really.
Could you explain a little bit about the designs you did for that exhibition, or what you precisely?
No, it's the three magazine, they are 5-6 story high, right? And only one, largely 1 to 1.5 or 1 to 2 story, they were dedicated to the exhibition. The rest was working as normal. And therefore, you have area that they were obviously confined to try putting the exhibit.
But you designed an actual house.
No, I designed the actual, but I designed it in a point that the issue was not. It was not a house. Let's say it was an apartment, right? So within an area in George Street of the magazine, or the fifth floor or something, half of that area was divided with partition to create that house.
Yeah.
So mostly it was to create a living room, and was creating studies, create bedroom, create kitchen.
Spaces.
So did you design the plan of that
Yes,
space?
I designed the plan, but I mean you have the design there, but it's confined. I mean we had no window, obviously, so being internal space. So that was designed to accommodate the furniture, really.
And then you had to select the furniture that went in every
Yes,
space.
and the furniture was all coming practically from, not directly from the Triennale, but was furniture that was all, practically everything there was exhibited in Triennale, but it was bought by David Jones from the manufacturer, that I was giving them the name, and so they had my chairs and the chair of De Carli and Albini things, and everyone included there had furnished 4 or 5 items, and then organized that in actual fact. Yeah.
So there is a picture of you and Sir Charles Lloyd Jones in Milan at your place.
No. That is not Sir Charles. It's Bishop, Mr. Bishop.
His son?
No. There is nothing to do with the family.
Okay.
He was the director of the London at David Jones in London. Sir Charles sent Marisa Martelli to Triennale to talk, and then when we organized the thing, he sent Mr. Bishop, that was in London, to Milano to finalize contract and finalize what they wanted to do and so on.
But it was the idea was more Italian design than really Italian architecture. Was there also a portion of the exhibition that was focused on actual showing architecture in Italy? Was that also shown, or that was not? It was more design and.
No, it was mostly design.
Design, yes.
That I didn't show any architecture in itself. It was design. So it was furniture design, was design of light fitting, something.
So
it was Lucia Fontana, design of glass from Venice, design of coffee pots and all that one from the full range. But within the house or the apartment, mostly there were minor number of it. We have 3 chairs and 4 chairs and something. While on the exhibition area we had hang table with wire and so on, and each one had ceramic, or they had little small sculpture, or knife and fork from Castiglione. So that was the organization.
So it was really David Jones that took it on itself to had kind of an educational role, educating the Australian.
Yes,
public?
it was really the issue was that educational and opening up to what Europe was doing. So you can call it education, but at the same time, I suppose it was
Broadening the horizons.
considering that perhaps, say, coffee machine will be taken over sometime, and so and big sea boat and so on would be needed in Sydney and and therefore having also a market. There was one with the very new thing coming from Europe.
At the same time, it seems to me that it was also kind of lifestyle they wanted to propose to Australia, because they were offering not just furniture or machines, but it was also cooking, architecture, design, fashion. It was like an idea of lifestyle, I suppose.
Do you think what was your impression when you arrived in Australia? Because could it be that they also wanted to provide a bit of a counterweight to the American influence in Australia at the time, or was that not an issue at that time yet?
No, I don't. You know, it's it was no Americanism at all. It's
It was later only.
was look, arriving in Sydney, and it was not a very clear days, but so the aeroplane took a bit of time to land, and I remember that we said, we've seen the harbour bridge, which is a harbour bridge passing under, and then after 5 minutes there it was again, because it was circulating on top there, and what you could see when this clearing was an enormous smudge of red tile roof. So I don't think they had, most probably the tallest building they were the David Jones stores, 5-6 story, but that was the maximum that it was up there, and all terracotta tile. Right. So the architecture in Sydney was that. It had all the connection with Europe was British. No way of thinking about United States or Americanism, was really British. Going to the cinema or the theatre, you would stand up at the beginning because they were playing God Save the King. And that was the ambience that we found, and with few pleasant finding. That was, we went to a restaurant which was good food and that, and they offer us, can you choose wine? And I never expected really to find wine in Australia. Well, ignorance, and the wine was very good. And then the wine industry was there, and the food was good, plain food if you wanted. They had few good restaurants. One of them was Beppe called, and it was an Italian one. And Mr. Beppe, Giuseppe, had a small farm in outside Sydney, and it was everything that you had, food that you had at this place, was from his farm, and it was all Italian. Good. So that's.
So, and what was the attraction for you to stay in Australia once you had arrived? Because you then only went back to pack up your things and move. So why did you decide to stay?
Oh, no, what I decided to stay. In arriving in Sydney, we had something exceptionally incredible again, that they treated us most probably as as kings. You know, everyone was having on the paper and so on and so forth, and everyone was accepting us as the most famous architect in Italy. Well, young, I mean, sort of that. One felt almost a bit
Uncomfortable.
embarrassed, but you take easily to those things after a while. And also, the people that we met there, they were all at the level of Sir Charles Lloyd Jones. Therefore, the Italian ambassador and the German ambassador, the Italian ambassador, 90% of the embassies, they were in Sydney, not in Canberra. And they were, exactly when we arrived, Bob Menzies, Prime Minister here, was requesting them to come to Canberra or else. And the Italian ambassador, was a minister at that time, because it was a legation and not an embassy. But in Sydney, said, look, are you going to Canberra? And I said, of course I will go to Canberra. So would you look for a place where we could stay or park and having an office? And I said, by all means, that's good. So that's what, I was coming to Canberra in any case, but that was the other connection. The Prime Minister, Bob Menzies, was not then Sir, but policy was really to create this place, Canberra, as a unique city, following Burley Griffin. Right? And that was the first time, but he did not have any real connection with the United States. I will specify that. But he was a British subject from top to bottom, right? What he realized was that really the only connection, political connection, that Australia needed was the military, call it military one, and it should be obviously toward United States and not toward England, because it's closer, because during the last war, Australia was the base for the reconquering, the headquarters of General MacArthur was in Brisbane. You know that, right? We slept there once because it's a hotel now.
So
the headquarters of the MacArthur
then
in Brisbane. Yeah.
you went to Canberra and you established your architecture practice in Canberra?
Yes.
And when was that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we arrived in Canberra, we seen things, we organized few things, and then we went back to, you could not stay. I had business visa, obviously. And when I finished the exhibition, we wanted to visit Australia, obviously, and when Sir Charles heard about it, and he said, do you need some help? And he said, that would be good. And he said, all right, how long would you stay? I said, let's say 6 months, going around. And he said, all right. He gave me a retainer. He said, look, I give you a retainer, you should not do any design for any other magazine, right? From any, and I calculated, in actual fact, yesterday after you left, that retainer was something like 2 sterling pound per week. That if you make I made a quick translation, that it seems ridiculous, but it will be something like $400 a week as retainer, doing nothing. Then he asked me to do a few things in the magazine, and that was paid. So that one was good, going around, and we stayed happily, not spending an enormous amount, but very good, considering. Then we could not stay in Australia with a business visa more than a certain, and you could not really having a permanent residence either. So when we went back to Italy, we had contacts of the top people here, and in Rome they had the embassy and the consulate, and we went up there and put all the paper together so we could come back as
residents.
Oh,
resident permit.
And after not more than a couple of years, I felt that one should take citizenship, largely because I was criticizing here and tried to look at part with the National Capital Development Commission, etc. And I was feeling embarrassed because I said, yes, I mean you are a resident here, but you cannot, enter into. And so I took my citizenship. Franca, my wife, didn't, but.
So when you came here, did you work for other architects, or did you immediately set up your own practice?
Yes, when I came here, I had met few friends before, so that I had something that I could do. But I asked the Royal Australian Institute of Architects, what should I do to be part of to have the registration? And what the answer was, oh, that's easy. I mean, you go to university, take your 5 years to study, and then you become an architect. And I said, he said, he must be joking. But I asked the first assistant secretary of the Department of Interior here that I met before, I said, is there any way that I can do it? He said, oh, leave it with me. And so he organized a meeting with the chief architect of the department, the chief engineer of the department, the representative of the institute, himself and myself, and we had a long discussion about things. And he said, right, I'll let you know. And 2 days after I received a phone call, he said, you are registered. Not by the institute. The institute didn't. So the only restriction was, and my registration number is number 14 in Canberra. And my that's another one. Now, and the restriction that one had by the institute was that you could not call yourself architect.
Oh.
And I said, so what? And then I thought a moment, and then all my drawings were called architecto. So that's it. That was my.
How did you find Canberra when you arrived here? How was Canberra?
Magnificent.
Mm.
No, right. Canberra, when we arrived here, now Canberra is unique. Now we know that it was a design in form that was very Griffin. The lake was not here, but you know, the fantastic. Reminded me of Africa. It seems strange, but the vegetation of eucalyptus Africa is population by eucalyptus given by Australia to I think Menelik, but this silence was music. You know, really, the silence was music. The air was clear, cold, but you know, magnificent day. Looking at the Brindabella up there, were covered with snow. So it was fantastic. It was really, like I was saying always, that it was the perfect place to be if you want to be a modern architect. Tomber dans le vide. You know, you have to fall in the void. And this one was the void, but full of soul. Right? And then also, you know, we started, and the first invitation to dinner was by the Dutch, by the Pays-Bas, and we arrived there. We arrived here. We stayed at the University House, where the master of University House was Professor Trendall, was someone who my father knew, and the Professor Trendall was an Etruscologist. He was a Etruscan thing there, and he said, "Oh, I stayed there in a little apartment in University House." And when he was talking, I said, "Enrico," and we had dinner quite often at the high table, you know, that British again, the high table with the thing that given to us, and all the students that they were postgraduate, they were taking the doctorate, they were all on the pleb down there, and that was, and he said, "Look, when you are invited someone at dinner," he was telling us that, and perhaps you believe that you know everything about architecture, just to say, don't be so sure. Never open your information before you know who's next sitting to you, because he may be the top researcher in architecture next to you, or can be the prime minister, and you know you be quiet, you know. Then, and the first time at the Pays-Bas, we arrived there, and in actual fact that the right of the ambassador was then Patty Menzies, and on the right of the wife of the ambassador was Bob Menzies, and was John Eccles there, and was a Nobel laureate, neurology, and was Oliphant there, the other one atomic thing there, and a lot of things there, and so, you know, imagine you are all of 29 or something, and you're going there and you're sitting, and that was Canberra at that time. So apart from the silence, apart from the magnificent air and so on, you know, going and look at the start Mount Stromlo, you know, no light around, magnificent view, etc. How can you go back to the pollution of Milano, except my wife, every time we went back every year practically, arriving in Milan, I said, that is good to breathe a bit of pollution.
So,
Yeah.
What building do you think was is your most important work that you did here?
The most important
For
thing,
yourself, yeah, that you designed. What would you consider your most important architectural contribution to Australia?
look, I think I cannot mention any. I cannot mention any. I think they are all children of mine, and they have all the fault like any child has, but a lot of satisfaction that slightly different. But I will have to, most probably, I will leave you with this one after, which is my contribution to Australian architecture. Right?
Fantastic.
And but in relation to that, in 2007, the institute, I received a call from the president of the institute and said, Enrico, would you accept to have the gold medal of the institute, right? So it's the top award that is given every year or almost every year to the top architect in Australia. And I remember I said, look, if I said no, would you allow me to publish the fact that I refused the gold medal? And he said, oh, no, that's not done. So I said, all right, obviously I will receive the gold medal.
And what was your motivation to say no? Why would you say no? It was not totally negative. Now, the fact that my connection with the institute was never that great. First, because of the first time, then they came to me and said, look, you're doing so much work, would you please ask us again? And I said, all right, I ask you again. And they gave me the institute registration. But also the fact that the institute, in principle, it's believed to be in charge of architecture, right? They believe that they are there as a custodian of architecture, and they are not, right? They cannot be. And I keep saying to them, no, you're not looking after architecture, you're not looking after architects. Doesn't matter, good, bad or indifferent, that is your function. It's not architecture. And so that one has been always something that I stress. So,
with not a great deal of result, but
if you can choose from your own buildings, what buildings constructed by other architects in Australia do you think were good, or did you?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it would be the Opera House, I think. Yeah, Opera House. In Canberra, I would not mention any, but if you're saying Opera House, that is another. Right, the Opera House is bringing back memory. 1955, landing in Sydney, and when I had the first interview, they asked me, "What do you think about an opera house?" Right now, I was here couple of days, in Sydney a couple of days. I did not know that the intention to design or build of an opera house, and I said, you must be joking. I mean, opera houses are think of the past. And a few days after, I realized that they were designing or they were preparing the exhibition for
The competition.
the competition for the opera house, right? So a bit of faux pas, but right now the opera house was most probably part of the same period of Australia where Sir Charles Lloyd Jones had an exhibition of European influence, and the government, Sydney government, Labourist government at that time, had really the same feeling of do something to put Australia into the world map. And they said, oh, why not a opera house? I mean, that's in the fact that they choose an opera house, but and saw the competition there as a very, very long and interesting history. As you know, I mean, the opera house, then Hudson won the competition, and he started designing and building. What I'm saying, start designing and building. Now, when the competition project was published in Europe, in Italy, and Pierluigi Nervi came up with a comment and said, oh, it's very good, very well, but please let me know how do you build it, you know, because I believe that is impossible. And that was the reality, but the fascination of that design is the architect in love with very thin structure, the eggs, right? Massachusetts Institute of Technology and so on. I mean, you know, he had eggs and you could walk on it with only strength and so on, but impossible to design. Now, so Hudson started building, and then he finished up with the shell. That is not a shell. It's a shell, a real shell, and etc. 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 Cost was escalating, but it was an opera house lottery that was practically paying for the building, and then the Labour government was dethroned, and the Liberal government came up there, and they started all the rot. Talking about cost, etc., etc. I have here the pamphlet for the competition of the opera house, and money is not mentioned there, right? It said it should cost it should be value for money. That's what they say, value for money, and that what I'm saying, that definitely that one has had value for money in relation to the and then again, I mean, look, the chief architect of Sydney, of New South Wales, became in charge of the opera house, and really, you know, something that was make me shivering. The institute didn't protest that much either, which is, you know, it's bad. That is the history of.
And so you were practicing in Australia for quite some time. Did you work with any colleagues or collaborators that you think were exceptionally good or were good to work with?
Yes, but colleagues that done good work.
No, that you worked with together on projects, or that worked in your office.
Yeah, in my office I had No, sorry. What is the?
It was. I assume you didn't always work by yourself. You also had collaborators, or you had
Yeah.
people working for you. Were there any that stood out? Is basically the question.
No, the largest number of people in my office, there was 6 of them, and was one architect, and the rest they were
Craftsmen.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, the engineers have been always working with an engineer. Quite often the same one. Not now it's another. Practically 2 engineers during the period there.
So do you think you have had a particular Italian contribution to Australian architecture?
No. Italian. When you're saying Italian architecture is not national, and that's what I say. Yes, I mean I had. Moretti was one of them in Italy, and in actual fact I had in talking about, and that is later obviously, but the influence architecture is, that's what I'm saying. Architecture should not be classified as a service but as an art. And as such, it's I guess that any good artist, modern artist, will not recognize many other artists, right? Because being unique to a certain extent, and it's a bit like that among architects too. They are not a very good group of friendly people. Yes, friendly as people, but not architect. And that's it. So no, I don't think if I have an influence, if my architecture has an influence, could be originally from Ethiopia, Lalibela, a fantastic church that is all built underground. And this fantastic shape. So the urban design, although it's in the middle of that, is nothing because it's level. I think it's coming up that much from the ground, but it's going up. That is the one that fascinated me, and old architecture, but not as such as a philosophy. It will be Hagia Sophia, right? Light influence.
But that's the influence that's it, what has influenced you. But do you think you have a different approach to architecture from people that were trained in Australia, from Australian architects? That is significantly
change after what?
No.
In relation to what I did.
Yeah, when you arrived, did you notice that you had a different approach to architecture from the approach that Australian and people that were educated and trained in Australia did, or did you notice any difference, or?
Oh, in fact, when I arrived here, architects that the architect that they were working on major projects, the enormous difference is that visiting their offices, you've found out that the minimal number of people working there were between 50 and 200, and therefore you're talking about an organization that is almost like the one in the United States. What Merrill had 5,000 in United States, and therefore my method of working was to say, no, I don't, I want to be able to control every facet of the building. Therefore, it's, you know, I should be myself. And I mean, some say another architect, but not necessarily as a contributor, but as someone that could
oversee and
yeah. But as an exception, recently, not recently, because one young architect came to the office for the 1 year of sabbatical, and I found him, you know, totally in agreement with what I was doing, not only with a cultural background, although totally Australian, lot closer to a classical background, and he stayed here all the time, always. So with him now, a building of mine is under construction that is the chancery for the Pakistan Embassy, High Commission, and that I designed 10 years ago, 12 years, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And it needed a bit of revision, and I offered him to work with me on that project. And this fellow called Brad Lowe. No, but that is my approach of architecture. It's not. You cannot delegate.
So, do you think that the fact that you received the gold medal from the institute, the gold medal from the Institute of Architects, was a kind of recognition of your work in Australia as an Australian? Did you feel something like that, not being different, or
my working in Australia? Really, that is the recognition of the. He said it really is given every year. Sometimes, not very often, it's not given. That is the other issue that I have with them after. But is recognizing the architect that in his life and his during as is the best architect at that time, right? So it's not something that is said is one every year, and so it's recognizing the architecture of that architect, not recognizing, although possibly mentioned that one was born somewhere else, but that is not the point.
I don't have any more questions.
There is something that you want to add about maybe your architecture. Do you want to say something about?
No, look, my architecture is there to be experienced. My philosophy of architecture, as I said, is a private domain, and is created not by the architect. It's created by the architect, but it's not really alive because of the architect. It's alive because of people using it. And the most important issue when you're designing something is that void that you create, the void that you create, which is the architecture, it should be, what I say, it should be wonderful. Now, when one say wonderful, say, oh, how can you say that? No, it's wonder. It's the important thing, right? It's wonder. If someone go there, if you design a school and then the kids, they not have a wonder into it, that you miss the point, right? If your client doesn't have a wonder for, let's say, as long as possible, familiarity bring content sometime, but that wonder should stay there, because it's always variable with your moon, not mine, yours, with the one who lives there, the one who come there and have a look and see and feel. That you achieve architecture, and the architect therefore is alive and died sometime, but not because it's changed, but because it's not creating that wonder. Right?
Okay, well, I think that's a nice ending to the interview. Thank you very much.
It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure. Good.